Paul Niggerberger.
Very good.
With the hardest last name to pronounce in the entire clinic here. Is a father of 6, and he's also been an educator. He spent 20 years as a high school coach, over 25 years, excuse me, at Carabel Academy in Delaware.
Correct.
And before that, played minor league baseball with both the Red Sox and the Mets. You know, has become the certified Jaeger sports instructor, and has also founded the Be At Your Best Academy. So a lot of educational components, and also a father. So this is good material that's going to kind of fit that mold for those of you that are looking to pass things along. So excited, and Paul Niggerberger.
Thank you. I've got to share with you how excited I am to be here and how humbled I am to be here. We've had 2 or 3 great days of great speakers, and I listened to Brent Strom, I listened to Rick Peterson and all the others, and it's really confirming some of the things that we're going to be discussing with you today. So very, very excited and humbled to be in your presence. Before I get started, show of hands, how many of you are youth league coaches, travel youth league coaches? How many of you are high school coaches? Any college coaches? Any pro guys? All right, very good. My presentation is about how long toss is more than tossing long. I think there's some misinterpretation, misunderstanding of what that really means. And the big deal is that we want to get away from the 120-foot mark that was established, and I'll go into that a little bit. I also have some images and slides that I would like to present to you as a way of supporting some of the points that I make. And hopefully you'll enjoy them. Some of them are quite comical, I think, but hopefully it'll get the point across. I'm not sure that you need anything more than this. I understand social proof and testimonials very well, and there's some really, really high-ranking people on this list here, and they're very good people too, honest people. These aren't paid advertisements, so to speak, but if for no reason alone, that list right there, I think says a lot, speaks volumes. We're small enough that I will entertain any questions that you may have, because my sole purpose is to try and influence you, educate you, and make sure that you get information from me. I mean, it's all about you guys. So I just want you to understand that. So I want you to walk out of here with useful, practical information. The areas that will be covered. The problem that we have currently and how that was originated, how that started. Also arm care and the proper preparation to throw, consequently, long toss. We'll talk about long toss, the benefits, and we'll define that and some of the potholes that you may expect. And then in closing, we're going to try to expand possibilities and change your perspective. And so I'll try to illustrate that with a little short story at the end. Before we get started here, I'd like you to try and do this with me if you could. I'd like to, for all of you, to give yourself a big, tight hug and just lean forward just a little bit. Okay, and hold that for 10 seconds. Okay, now I'd like you to stand up, if you could. I want you to raise your arms, and I want you to tilt back a little bit. Okay, my question to all of you is this. Which one, the first demonstration that I asked you to do, that's the way I think we've taught our pitchers. That's the way our pitchers feel. And that's what I'm going to try and solve and teach you. You can sit down. Because I think it's that restriction, that rigidity that we'll talk about that so many of our athletes feel, versus expand, grow, let nature take its course. There's a big, big difference. So again, here's a slide that illustrates some things here. It's natural to start out feeling uncomfortable. We want you to hold your ground. Sometimes it's insurmountable goals for those of you that don't know long toss and all the other things that go on. There are as many theories as there are coaches. We all know about that. But we have to have perspective. Okay, the present problem as we see it. 120 foot. You know, where did that magical number come from? Well, I think it all started about 20 years ago with limited time of 10 minutes to throw with limited distance. It was the advent of post-surgeries. The medical community adopted it because they're very conservative. The pro guys said, hey, if the medical community is endorsing it and promoting it, we certainly don't want to hurt our athletes. But where did that 120-foot mark come from in terms of long tossing? No one has a substantial answer for me that I find acceptable. So it was just a matter of the trickle down to baseball community. Major League Baseball, it was quantifiable, it was easy, 120. And of course backed up by the medical community. The 120 10-minute program is polar opposite of what we believe in. And the illustration that we just completed, where you were hugging yourself very tightly, is the restriction, the confinement that we don't want to see. We want to let it out. We want to open it up. We want to air it out. In short, the original 120 regresses. You got atrophy, rigidity, influence, and we've got healthy arms using rehab standards. That's a problem. So what's happening now is that instead of 120, we're now going to 180. Okay, again, where's that 180 come from? I understand that there are some naysayers. I understand that people say, well, if you throw it long, you change angles, you change release points. And my response to that would be simply, well, how about your shortstop? Does your shortstop change angles, and is he able to throw accurately to first base or wherever he's throwing the ball? Sure he is. And those of you that study the pitching mechanics and the video analysis, you don't get to release point every single time identical. Brent Strom put it very nicely. He said, we're getting confused about the law of specificity. What that means is that you've got to do it exactly what you do on the mound when you pitch. Well, if you're going to do that, you might as well pitch on the mound all the time. And we all know that that's not possible. There's too much stress. So this is as close and yet different as you can get to simulate and stimulate the delivery that we use for pitching. So that's an important point. Why, if we take the standard of the college pro guy, let's say the major league average, and you can confirm that back there, sir. Let's say the average is about 90 miles per hour. Okay, at 90 miles per hour, you've got about a 30-degree arc. And that translates into upper 80s, 90 miles per hour. Well, if we're going back to the 120, that's 40% of your potential. You're leaving 60% of your potential on the table. I'm not sure that that makes any sense to me. The Dominicans, the Far East people, the Japanese, it's been known for a very long time that they throw often, and they don't get injured as often, and they long toss. Why is that the case? There's no time constraints. There's no distance constraints. There's no number of throws constraints. I heard this again, supported by the panel. I don't know if any of you saw the panel last night of the pro pitching guys. You know, they say they believe in long toss. They see this all the time. Bobby Valentine was talking about the Japanese. He spent, 10 years coaching there, whatever number of years. He's talking about they definitely throw 140, 200 pitches. Imagine if we did that today. We'll get into some other things here, but very, very important. There are two major contributing factors to the evolution of 120, as I mentioned before. Time throwing and the influence of the Major League Baseball. The problem and the reality of limiting, constricting to 120 is that you don't get length, you don't get stimulation, you don't accelerate through release, which can only be done by increasing the distance. Long toss is just not throwing it in an arc out. There's a pull-down phase, which we're going to explain in a few minutes. When one gets injured really the work stress is based on the fatigue stress threshold. You know, it's not just one pitch that takes you down. It's a culmination of things. It's like the turtle on the fence post. How did we get there? I got there through a variety of different people, different experiences, and different situations. So that one pitch could be when you go down, but it's not that one pitch that caused it. It's over time. And so what is your threshold of stress? What is your workload? What is your training? All things that need to be examined. Then we come with the pitch count. The pitch count is an arbitrary number. I understand that there is a number necessary. I understand the reasoning behind it. It's a Band-Aid approach in my humble opinion. It's just much like the 18-year-old versus the guy that's 17 years old and 364 days old. The legal system clearly has boundaries for those individuals in terms of rights and responsibilities. It's all based on one day. We're all based on 100 pitches, throwing 100 pitches, or 90 pitches, or 120 pitches, whatever your thoughts are. It's an arbitrary number. We have so many resources. We have better technology. We have pitching coaches. We have video analysis. We have stronger athletes. The list goes on. We've reached epidemic proportions with arm injuries. There's something wrong here. We've got to continue to examine this. So that's why we continue to search and stretch. I have a clip here that I think you'll find interesting. Before I get started on that as well, I mentioned to you that we kind of started this all based on rehab work. Where is the prehab? That's the critical area we should be asking ourselves. What are we doing to prevent this stuff? Not after they're damaged and then we rehab them. And I don't think we're rehabbing them properly as well. And I'll explain that and illustrate that as well. A common problem. I have a video clip, or not video clip, a picture of Billy Wagner. They call it the valgus stress. Here's Mr. Wagner. Imagine that stress placed on the shoulder and the elbow. That's incredible. We statically cannot take our arms back. I can go this far statically, but when I throw a baseball, it'll go back even further. The hard throwers, look at their arms, that external rotation that you see. It's a wonder how he's not hurt all the time. But typically, a rehab or a progression should follow these steps, wouldn't you think? Okay, 60 to 120, low stress, low range of motion. You continue to work up. 120 plus, medium range of motion, medium stress. 240, a little bit higher range of motion. And then you get to the ultimate, the final, you get your mound work. And that's high range of motion, high stress. The problem is, it seems like the college pro guys, or the pro guys in particular, it seems like they miss steps 2 and 3. They miss steps 2 and 3. They're back to the 120. Well, to me, that would be like saying, how about if an MMA octagon fighter does 50 jumping jacks or 100 jumping jacks to get ready for an octagon fight? I mean, it just doesn't match the end activity doesn't match the training or the preparation. And I see this as being a problem. How can we demand full throttle on the mound when we're not training that to some degree, either through long toss, arm care, or some bullpen mound work? How can we expect that? At the younger levels, we tell kids to go to the bullpen and throw without supervision. Oh, go throw up. The guys throw a few, without a catcher sometimes, throw a few, and then we expect them to go full throttle in a ball game with pressure on the mound. And we wonder why they go down. At the higher levels, they miss steps 2 and 3. Sometimes I think of this picture. We have an oak tree trying to be cultivated in a greenhouse. We need nature to take its course. It's like an oak tree can't grow in a flower pot. We need to let the arms breathe. We need to talk to the arms. We need to let it go. Not an ideal environment. And this picture kind of depicts the tree growing, and these construction people are trying to fix that and work that out a little bit. I think sometimes we feel all too often, parents, coaches, and players, we just feel so restricted. We feel so confined. We feel compressed. We're disappointed. We've got to allow it to breathe. So that kind of leads us into the 4 phases of preparing to throw correctly. It starts with warming the body up, loosening the arm, raising body temp. We do this with some arm circles. Sometimes the older kids put 2 or 3 baseballs in their hands. Flexed arms and just shoulder high. And then just continue to go bigger and bigger, small circles, big circles. Then we get into the surgical tubing. It is mandatory in our program. I coached at the high school level. I've coached there 26 years. My guys' arms are pretty good. And it's mandatory before they throw, they must do their surgical tubing. They must warm the body up properly. Very, very important. The Jaeger Sports has a core exercise of about 11 of them. It's at booth 602 if you're interested. It's on the DVD as well. But and we demonstrated that in the breakout session, but there's basically 11 core exercises that you must do, internal, external rotation, etc. Then we get into the technical aspects, the mechanics, a lot of post-stride stuff, and then you get into the long toss. And some of the key points that I just want to highlight, I know that you can read them, but I think all of this stuff lends itself to making sure that there's blood flow, particularly afterwards. Oftentimes we don't do things afterwards. We don't run, we don't do band work afterwards. Well, that's when the body and the area that's heavily used becomes traumatized, and that's when you need to regenerate with fresh blood flow. Very, very important. And the real reason why it's so important is because of recovery. You have to do it right away. You have about a 3-hour window to do that, to maximize and optimize the benefit. So make sure you get blood flow. Anytime you do surgical tubing or exercise, it should be smooth, continuous, and controlled. Anything herky-jerky, to me, is a red flag. We try to avoid that. Quality versus quantity, usually 20 reps or so. With different exercises, it varies, maybe 30 seconds. So it depends. Muscle balance and symmetry, very important. When you have asymmetry and you have imbalances and you're not stable with your joints, then things occur. Negative things occur. So we all have to be securing the joints, stabilizing the joints. Postural alignment with the band is very important, and most people forget this too. You must breathe. It's got to be long, fluid breathing anytime you do something like that. So those are some of the key points when we talk about preparing to throw and band work. The arm needs commitment, needs committed attention. You've got to listen to your arm. Tom House coined a phrase that I like. Your body isn't dumb if you let it be smart. Allow your athletes to share some things with you. You as the coach are there to guide them, support them, and challenge them, but also observe. Mandatory, as we talked about, 4 phases. The arm is very important. Scouts have a certain section for arm strength, for arm accuracy. It can be your lifeline. It could be career-ending, career-threatening. So pay attention to the arm. Oftentimes it's neglected. It's not just for pitchers. Obviously all these things prevent soreness, irritation, also prevents it from breaking down, and certainly builds strength and endurance. You have a quicker recovery period. There are many experts in the field of rehab and orthopedic people that I respect, and they say that you have to go about 240 feet out without pain before you can get on a mound where there's more stress. Yes, sir.
You know, I know you're in the middle of your flow,
yes,
but I got a question for you. It seemed to me at the beginning when you were asking who was representing who,
yes,
there was more youth sports,
yes,
got hands up than anything else. Are those numbers for youth sports? Because I'm thinking like, you know, Little League to like 13, 14, you know, can you adjust those numbers in your presentation now or give us some additional?
I can. Yes, that's a great question. The youth, you definitely have to downsize. The problem with the youth is that they can't control their bodies in terms of a repeatable motion. So those numbers, these numbers are based on high school, college type kids and pros. So those numbers that you're talking about have to be established, and we're in the process of doing that. I can
So
talk.
you don't have anything in your mind right now that you could throw out as like an upper limit?
Well, you have to use, it depends what age group you're talking about and what field you're talking about, you know, what age group you're talking about, but use the field dimensions that they're accustomed to throwing. All I can say is you try to extend that. And here's what I would suggest to you. When you long toss, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more, the determining factor of how far you go out is based on how accurately and how straight the ball will go. In other words, I can't tell you that right now because it's different for each athlete. I can tell you that when I throw a ball and that ball is straight and I can hit my target 5 times, then that's a distance I can handle. If I'm all over the place and I see that at the high school level, college level, then I've got to back up. So my response is I can't give you a set number. I can tell you how accurately they are. Okay? That's a good question. So those are some things here. I want to show you, I think, what an interesting video clip is of the proper long toss and how it's done. So I think you'll find this interesting.
This freedom from constraints is what allows the arm to gain distance, endurance, and strength. Notice how relaxed the players are behind their throws. Notice how loose their arm action is. As they continue to follow their arms, notice how they keep increasing their distance with minimal effort. All that's really happening is that they are throwing up a little more arc and a little more effort as they move away from their throwing partner. But the key is that they are still stretching their arms. They are not in a hurry to throw aggressively. We want the arms to walk before they jog and jog before they run.
We call it the calm before the storm. This is all about getting the arm stretched out properly, good blood flow, good range of motion.
Again, the goal is to listen to the arm and to focus on stretching. As the players continue to move further away from each other, their focus is on loose arm action and stretching. Even as the players start to make their way to some of these more extreme distances like 360 feet, you can still see an element of stretching in their arm action. They are throwing the ball more aggressively, but they are doing it in a very safe manner because they have opened their arm up in a progressive manner. Even at these long distances, they are still thinking in terms of stretching rather than throwing. Once the players feel that they have reached their maximum distance for the day, we will begin the second phase of our long toss program, the pull down or strengthening phase. The beauty of the pull down phase is that you are actually still thinking about your furthest throw of the day, in this case 360 feet. The object is to still maintain loose arm action. The only thing that changes is the arc of the ball and your release point. You just have to make an adjustment to the focal point. As you watch these pull downs, notice the explosiveness and athleticism behind each throw. It's a true art form when you see a 360-foot throw translated to 240, 120, and eventually 60 feet. This is where a player can truly see how distance throwing translates into velocity. As you watch the players go through their pull downs, you can see how much leverage and explosiveness they are creating. It's also a time where I believe players can hit a completely new level of velocity. This is where it gets fun for the players and coaches.
93. 94. 96. 97.
To me, it's amazing. All right, how do we get back out of here? Okay. The point I want to make there that it's become free and easy, and that you just saw happened in succession. It wasn't, one day he was throwing long toss. It was right after the long toss he threw up those numbers. So it's all about being free and easy, and I thought that was pretty impressive. That's your kids. You can expect your kids to do that. They don't have to be superstars. How many of you would believe that concentration and confidence are important factors in performing. I would think everyone in this room would agree with that, at least if it's not the top two, it's the top three. I am of the firm opinion and belief that if you let the ball or the drill become your teacher and do less of this, you're more apt to stick in terms of kids retaining the information. So what better wonderful way, I feel, than long toss? Imagine you go out, whatever distance you're going out, you're able to throw accurately to your target, and then on the pull down phase, which is part of this long toss, you pull it down, accelerate through release, you bring it back in, and now you're aiming for the front opposite throwing side shoulder of the receiver. Imagine if you can keep it down to knee level, forcing you to get great length, great extension, great stimulation out front. Well, if you do that, wouldn't your confidence go up? And certainly your command would go up. Okay, and this release, different angles, different releases is something that you clearly will see. Yes?
Is this just specific for pitchers, or would you recommend this for any position player as well?
Fantastic question. Do me a huge favor. I just want to make sure I get through my program, and then I'm going to allow you some questions, but there's some things that are important. That's okay. They're great questions. I'll answer that real quick. I used to believe it was just for pitchers. I have now done this for all my positional players. And the beautiful thing is, they crave it. They want it. The body wants more. They start getting greater distances. It's amazing. And I say that purely out of experience for a long, long time doing this. Listen to your arm. You tell people to throw with great intensity. Well, talking is one thing and doing is a totally other thing. When you increase the distance, you got to throw the ball hard. And all of a sudden, you get that good synchronization. You get that good internal tempo, and you recruit all the muscle fibers, range of motion, oxygen, and blood flow. Let the ball become your teacher. One important point I want to make is that distance exposes flaws. If I'm throwing the ball and I'm free and easy, and the ball's sailing, flailing, doing all sorts of kind of stuff, not throwing to my target, well, we've got issues. Then we need to back up. But the ball will become your teacher. It'll tell you what you need to work on, and distance exposes problems. Imagine if I had a batting team and I'm hitting it to that net. Every ball that I hit seems to be good. But what happens if I move away from that net? And now I can see the ball diving, I can see it lifting, or whatever the case may be. So distance exposes problems. That's a good thing from a coaching perspective. Here are some standards that you can apply to your situation that I thought were interesting. The guy that you saw in the video clip threw, 97 miles per hour? And he was going the length of the football field. I think it was 360, 370. I mean, that's bringing it. And his arm is alive. Some of these things I've mentioned to you already. I do believe that the body will crave it. I do follow this 5M approach, meaning that whenever I do something, I kind of think of the 5 M's in the sense that, is it manageable? Is it meaningful? Is it motivational? What's the other one? Is it memorable? And is it measurable? Absolutely. We can go on a football field and measure. We can go on a baseball field and see our improvement and measurement. And the kids love it. The kids love it. We feel so strongly about this that we think that you should long toss to prepare to pitch on the mound. Where most coaches feel that you should pitch on the mound and then just go ahead and long toss and free yourself up. So there's a paradigm shift there for us. You do this on 3 times a week, whatever the case may be, your arms are going to be healthy and the workload's going to be handled. About 4 to 6 weeks to rest, reload, and rebuild before you get to long toss in the off season. And of course, some things apply differently. It depends on when you are in your season in terms of leading up to the spring for many high school coaches and youth league programs. Okay, long toss continued. Rick Peterson made a comment yesterday that I think is critical. In our program, you must throw a changeup to be an effective pitcher. And what better way to develop a changeup by long tossing? When that ball basically dies, that's a great way to teach and feel what a changeup is. I believe that. I have expressed it locally, but here's a guy at the highest level in baseball that's worked with Santana and Superstar. He said it. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. We have different phases of the long toss, kind of, which we've talked about. I'm of the opinion that the more we use our arm properly, the more it will produce, versus the opposite way. In implementing this long toss program, there are some things that you need to be aware of. I've listed 6 different things there. Be careful that when you get out to distances, you throw maybe 10, 8, 9, 10 throws. When you get out to distance, that you use your crow hop. You use momentum. You just don't want to heave it. You want to crow hop and always use momentum. I also suggest that you partner up with somebody of equal ability and talents. It's not, it's not too much fun when you got a guy that's got a rocket arm and a guy that has some difficulties, doesn't have the arm strength or durability. So try to partner that up if you can.
Was that guy in that video throwing it back to him?
Yeah. But not at the 97 though.
No.
Before that. Yeah. Too far too soon. We deal with the kids and they get big egos, and sometimes they just want to see how far they can throw. Well, you're defeating the purpose when you do that. Always throw smooth, continuous control, accelerate out front to a target. You ought to be able to hit the target. Very, very important. Working too fast between their throws, just observe their pace. That's something to look for. Anytime you see herky-jerky movements, back it up. Very, very important for that as well. Okay. So the changeup, I think, is a good thing. Allow potential to become your reality. Get invited to the big dance. Now, everybody's obsessed with the radar gun. We use it in our programs to see pitch differentials. But let's face it, guys like Jamie Moyer, the Glavins of the world, if they went to an exposure clinic camp today, guess what? They may not be the same guys that we recognize. Scouts like guys that throw hard. They like electricity. They like a live arm. So we just need to try and develop that within the framework. What I'm suggesting to you is that this arm care long toss program will close the gap between where they are and their potential. No one knows where their potential is. So that was just an illustration there that I wanted to share with you. Conventional wisdom, the traditional way of thinking. Sometimes we have to challenge that. We have a new world model. It's really about building athleticism. Build the athlete's pitch. Okay, not pitching. One of the things that I felt that Brent Strawn made a good point the other day. You can't grow an oak tree in a greenhouse kind of concept. He said that they had these jumping beans that jumped 120 feet, let's say. They had these jumping beans jumping 120 feet. Well, then they got a shell or a cup and put that over the jumping beans. Okay? So they continued to jump within that shell. Then they removed the cup or shell, and the jumping beans only jumped 50 feet. Okay? Well, that's what I think we're doing with arms. Create the athleticism. Do we feel overwhelmed? Yes. Are we robotical and mechanical? I think so. The magic is not the dots, it's connecting the dots. So it's about smooth continuous control again. It's really about gravity. It's the strongest force in the universe. It's about support, it's about movement, and it's about support again. The slowing up and fighting gravity, I think, is a problem. And what I can relate to is, if you ever see a cat, when it springs, it's not going way down, back up. It's already loaded, and it just fires. Pitching, we're loaded and gone. We're in an athletic position. Whether we're talking about hitting, a linebacker, throwing a baseball, pitching a softball, it's all the same. Building the athlete. Changing perspective. Fast cars were not meant to be driven in a neighborhood. What's under the hood? We got to test it. Okay, we got to test it. We got to air it out. Under control. Let it grow. Let it breathe. Expand. challenging, finding that good pose. There is a wave of momentum that we need to catch. It's happening at the highest levels, and that's often used for validation. Colleges are doing it well. I believe that high school kids that get drafted to college, they develop at a quicker rate, I believe, in college than they do at the pro level. I'm not sure why that is. That's my belief. Ride this wave of momentum. It's happening. More and more people and organizations are buying into the fact of long toss. You know, as a surfer, what's the goal of a surfer? It's to get the biggest wave and ride that biggest wave in. That's the fulfillment that athletes get. It's the challenge. So here we are today, being expressive and getting challenged. I look at this picture and I think of an athlete. Nature is a beautiful thing. Allow it to grow. The Jaeger throwing program, Arm Care, has been successful for over 20 years now. He's the one that kind of started all this. It's an amazing thing. I want to leave you with this, and I'll entertain some questions at the end here, but I had a short parable for you. Here we have an elephant. We have 5 people standing around with a blindfold. 5 blind men were shown the elephant and asked what they saw. The first one was standing in front, carefully examined the trunk, and it looked like a large hose pipe. The second one was standing by the tail. It reported that the brush was made up of long, wiry strands. The third one was standing to the side and thought that it was a large leather wall. The fourth one was standing by the ears, and it said that it was standing next to some sort of sailing vessel because of the large, durable sail he could feel. The fifth one was standing at one leg, and he believed that he was standing next to a tree trunk. So, each of them heard the other's description of what was going on. And so they thought to themselves, they were arguing back and forth based on their own perspective and their own experience. They continued back and forth. They got kind of heated, and they were starting to make some caustic remarks and insulted each other and the intelligence of each other. They were calling each other fools. After all, this back and forth arguing, they re-examined their own perspectives to prove to themselves that they were in fact right and others were clearly out of their mind. After all, the evidence proved it. The truth plainly cannot be revealed from a single perspective. The failing of each blind man was not the quality of their own examinations. It was not a problem of intelligence. The problem was that none of them changed where they stood. The more heated debate, the more entrenched they became. The sad part of this little story is that none of them, not a single one, could actually see the truth of what stood plainly before them. No one could see the big elephant. They were all completely blind. Turns out having sight makes us no less blind. We all see the world from our own perspective and from our own experiences. That's a fact. When we argue, we don't ask questions. We don't seek to understand. And that's a problem. As we move forward based on our perceptions. The polarization that we see many times is a societal problem. We have that today with politics. To the point where we don't listen, we don't learn, and we don't seek to understand. I think that's a problem. After all, how will we know what's best for the elephant if we can't even see that it is an elephant? Coaches, parents are becoming polarized when it comes to pitching mechanics, arm care, and we as leaders, we as the community, we as the baseball fraternity cannot allow that to happen where we just simply blame other people and don't ask great questions and don't look at it from an understanding perspective. So next time you implement these things and you do some long toss, try to see that big elephant if you could. I think it's an illustration that kind of brings me back home. One of the things I wanted to share with you, again, to make it valuable for you, how many of you, most of you are in this area, I believe, or at least in cold climate weather. We're not out west where we can be outside 24/7. You might ask yourself, well, how do we long toss inside? Great question. My recommendation would be this. If you get inside a gymnasium, you throw against the wall, you move back a little bit, you keep raising it, the arc or the distance in height a little bit up until you get close to the ceiling. And on the way back, you come down and you now get down through the pull down phase. If you want a little bit more room, I would suggest, and I'm not good in geometry or math, but maybe work diagonally. Someone also said, well, maybe we should, we're going to damage the banners and whatever else you have out there. So I would strongly suggest you use an Incredible, just make sure of the weight being 5 ounces. That would be my recommendation for throwing indoors. The arm has to throw. So do the best you can in terms of limited.
Can you be a little more specific about the long toss? Are we talking 100 throws here, 30 throws here, 50 throws? And
Great
each
question.
station, people have different opinions.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. The progression should be this. You move back about 10 feet each time. You throw about 8, 9, 10 throws. So you go out as far as you can until you can't hit that guy in the air or accurately. After you get to that point, you come back in. And when you come back in, it should be about 3 throws, 2 throws, 1 throw at each spot. And the reason, that's, in our opinion, that's the beauty of it all, that it's not constrained to the number of throws, the certain distance. There may be times where your athlete doesn't feel like throwing that distance or doesn't want to throw as much. But the point being is that they do it. So for
obviously, more throws moving back on the warm-up phase, if you will.
10 versus 3, 2, 1. Okay, does that make sense?
That's what I assumed, but I just want to hear
Yeah.
your mouth.
Okay. Yes, that's a great question. Yes, sir.
All right. Since most of us are in either high school or youth setting, obviously the people that be pitching or whatever, we're going to be running practices, they're going to be playing the field. So how often are you going to do that? And are you going to do that? And how do you limit your throws? Because they have to practice the field and whatever. How do you use it?
Great question. Keep the concept in mind, if you would. The concept is we like to throw often. I understand that you have your shortstop being your pitcher and outfielders and that they throw a lot. If you have a pitcher, I believe that you should long toss as a warm-up prior to, after you warm up before you start your skill set. So I do that with all my players. I leave it up to the pitchers in terms of what they want to do, how far they want to go out, based on their next start, based on what they've done previously. If I use that as a frame, and then around that I say, okay, well my shortstop, middle infielder, outfielders, they need work. Well then I would hit them some balls and then place the balls in the bucket if their arm wasn't felt up to throwing those volumes or that workload. Okay?
How often a week would you say you are?
2, 3 times a week. And I would also say, I would say 2, 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week in terms of throwing volume. And again, it's based on the individual, it's based on tolerance. It's very important. Again, we believe that you throw often. We throw every day. And the Latin players, the Japanese, what is it that they do? They just throw often. I want to get back to you because you asked the question.
Well, I had another one too. Would you recommend the same amount of throwing depending on in-season, off-season, or do you throw 3 times a week no matter what part of the season?
Fantastic question. No, in-season 3 times, off-season, I would have to build up 4 to 6 weeks, establish a good power base. One thing I failed to mention, the cords is connecting a small connective tissue muscle. So you're building and maintaining structure in that joint. But weights in the weight room, I'm not opposed to that, done properly where you really build. So you build yourself a good athletic base. And you do that for about 4 to 6 weeks. And then you start throwing on flat ground, and then you start extending long toss. Yes?
I'm coaching 10 to 12s. How do you start your season off? So a month or 2 from now when I work inside, I'm not going to start doing long toss right away, right?
No, you're not.
How would you approach the beginning of the season and working up in 3
Ten-
or
well,
4 weeks, 10 to 12?
I would have them just throw the ball accurately and straight with smooth, continuous, controlled action. Once they've mastered that over a period of time, I can't tell you that. You're going to have to determine that. Then I would just increase the distance. Just increase the distance a little bit more, but you have to have a good foundation. If we start increasing distance and they have no idea of body parts, and that's usually the case at that age, so you can't go there. But the point being that they should throw often with smooth, continuous controlled movements and going back. Yes, in the back.
My question is, you talked about the 120-foot, spec distance in Major League Baseball, and then you guys talked about increasing to about 350 or whatnot. So based on
Possibly.
Yeah, possibly. So based on the video that you showed, when you start getting past the 120 to the further distances, the video showed the release point or the arc on the ball was, quite high. So my question is, once you get back to those distances, aren't you preaching consistent arm slot and pull down at all the distances? And if you're not preaching that, you're kind of affecting your arm slot or release point as you get back to say that 350.
Okay, good question. The law of specificity says that I can't be identical in terms of what I would do in a mound. As I go out, the arc on the ball is immaterial. It's 30 degrees. On the way down, I'm very, very close to try and mimicking what I would do on a mound. It's not going to be identical, but that sensation, that feel of coming back in from 350 to 60 feet 6 inches is where we want to be so that we can prepare that athlete as best we can through that program onto the mound, gain stress, pressure.
So would you agree that Major League Baseball might use that 120 spec? Because
Oh, yeah.
they're using a consistent arm slot at that 120
Absolutely.
where they can keep the ball in the same line.
If that's your point, yeah, that's exactly why they're using it, but the strange thing about it is, okay, so there's that magical number of 120. Well, guess what's happened? They're now extending it to 180. So at what point do you say, well, it's not identical, but it's close enough? The point being is, I think we're splitting hairs. If you can come in, Barry Zito said that I throw at these great distances, and I've built intimacy with my release to the point where I have better command and control of my curveball. You see, So that would be my response. I think we're very quantifiable with things, and we're very conservative with things. At the major league level, you're talking big bucks, and you don't want to be the one that screws a career up. So I think we're very cautious.
Can you go back over your comments about a changeup that you rolled through?
Changeup. If you can throw long toss throwing changeups, when you get to 60 feet 6 inches, you're going to, or if you're younger, 46 feet, you're really going to master that, and you should develop that changeup at younger levels. That's really important. Locate the fastball and changeup. So when you throw your changeup, you will see the ball die. So are you going to go out to 350 feet on a changeup? No. It's not that difficult. I don't want to sound like I'm complicating things matters here. It's really to tolerance. It's to the abilities and skills of the players that they can do and how they feel.
So about what distance was that guy?
370.
What was his, does he throw a changeup?
I'm sure he does, but I don't know him personally.
I'm just curious how much further in he had to come in to throw his changeup.
Great question, but I would go as far as I could and reaching my target, my intended target, with the changeup grip. So I don't know what that exactly is.
So it's a different workout, or is that what you'd say?
No, it's not a different workout.
Well, what I mean is, do you go out with the intention of throwing all changeups to a distance and then coming back in with changeups?
No. Oh, good question.
Fastballs?
Good question. Great question. I would go out, when I come in, that's when I would start my changeup. And the closer I am is really when I focus in on changeups. And when you get back to 60 feet 6 inches or 46 feet, that's when I start building in my repertoire of pitches. My changeups, my curveballs, or the older kids, fastballs, sliders, cutters, whatever the case may be. That's a good question.
So you're talking about throwing the changeup strictly as part of the pull down phase?
Yes. That makes sense for a lot of reasons, and it's probably shorter distance, but it's that longer distance than the traditional 60 feet 6 inches.
Early season long toss programs, do you have to have that pull down phase on the way in? I mean, I know that's kind of a personal preference thing, but can it just be,
Absolutely.
regular toss?
1 to 2 weeks, yes.
Minimal effort.
Absolutely.
On the
But
way
it's
in?
yes. You as a coach have to get a sense and feel for that. Is that athlete handling his body? Pitching is all about handling your weight and able to transfer that weight. It's all about handling your body weight, let alone how to pitch. So yes, go ahead and throw it nice, free and easy, accurately. Do that for 1, 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. And now we start thinking about the second part, the pull down phase, which is long toss. That's another good question. Yes, sir.
Do you have a DVD that
that explains all this?
Yes. If you, before I forget, jagersports.com. Jagersports.com. I think I left it on my. I left it on the initial title of the screen, but he's got a DVD that talks about exactly what I've been talking about. He's got a great article in Collegiate Baseball about how arms regress. And it's just great information that you can make applicable to your situation. Yes?
Is this something you talked with ASMI, Dr. Andrews?
Yes, we've been in touch with ASMI. And they're starting to, and I don't want to speak for them, but they're starting to expand and increase the distance. It used to be 120, I believe they're going up to 180 now. So, once again, somebody's got to start, you know? I think my time is up. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. Hopefully I've been able to influence you, and I wish you the best, and don't forget to see that elephant. Thank you.